interested in what Pete has to say. Go ahead. Pete?
Hi. Boy, what a phenomenal discussion, Pat. This is probably one of the most interesting shows you've ever had.
Thank you.
And I thank you for the opportunity. I'd like to address Dr. Dietz on one issue. And by the way, I don't think we should get away from the fact that the whole discussion is on whether we should teach this in the schools or not. It appears that we've gotten away from that. I think that if we are going to teach evolution in the schools, which we are, we should also be allowed to teach creationism and give the student the ability. That's what school's all about, is to be able to show both sides of the coin. I might add that in the theory of evolution, I'd like to give you the definition from Webster's dictionary. It's an abstract thought, an unproved assumption, a plausible or scientific acceptable general principle. When you look at the theory of evolution, it is very much based on faith, just like a Christian's belief is based on the Bible. And I think that what we need to keep in light, as Mr. White just said, is that there are no proven facts that evolution is correct. It's all based on assumption. And we talk about the scientific thing. You can go into the Bible and look at the theory of the speed of light. The Lord said a day is 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is as a day, and that can be proven against the theory of the speed of light. I think what needs to be kept in mind in this whole discussion is that you cannot prove either one. You have to base it all on the theory of faith. And Darwin himself actually avoided the discussion of the sociological aspects of his work. However, there's many people, such as Dr. Dietz, that has made a conclusion and followed that through.
Let's pass it on to Dr. Dietz. Pete, I thank you very much for some very, very interesting food for thought, and I would like to know if you will respond initially to his request that you leave it up to the kids themselves and the teachers in public school.
Nonsense. You should teach the state of the art in the school. The state of the art as known to the experts in the field, which are the biologists concerning evolution. Now, you can teach about creationism. By the way, he's speaking, of course, he's speaking of biblical creationism, not of the 2,000 other varieties of creationism, according to the Babylonians, the Hittites, and so forth. He's speaking of a particular type, biblical creationism. Now, this is religion. This violates the First Amendment. Now, if you want to teach, you can't teach astrology in an astronomy course. You can't teach in astronomy that the world is the center of the solar system. You can't teach the Earth is flat. You have to teach what we believe to be true. There are no absolute facts, but there are hard facts. And the fact of evolution is as firm as any fact we have in science. It's as firm as the Earth being round and not flat. People who object to evolution are indulging in an anguished protest against the whole of science and modernity as anti-science.
We have to move on to Richard, who is standing by, and before he gets older and evolves into another species, please go ahead on KTAR.
Yeah, Pat, I just had three quick things that I wanted to say. First of all, I'm a born-again Christian, but I have read a number of things, and I agreed with the previous caller. You can't ever prove either one scientifically. There's a good book out by Josh McDowell that historically sets down a foundation for the Bible. Mm-hmm. That's the first thing I'd like to say, and then I'd like to say that so having studied the Bible, I had some understanding of it. I was going through Harvard Classics one day, and I came across a writing by Thomas Huxley, who I guess was an agnostic, and he began to talk about how early schools were all taught in a religious setting or of that type, and then they begin to get away from that, and as they begin to find things that went before the time of Christ, and they basically skipped over that, and they begin to get into science. And that's kind of what Paul in the book of Romans was talking about when he talked about people that had different theories and what have you.
Your conclusion, sir.
Okay. One final thing. There's a book out called The Mainstream of Human Progress, and what this book goes on to say is that until people believed in a single deity, they could never have science because everything was haphazard or random. It wasn't until they believed in a single God that had things in control that men could actually begin to engage in science and humans could begin to develop into the society we have now.
I thank you very much once again for your participation, and so that Glenn gets on, I'm going to ask you to be brief so we can have some closing comments from our guests. Glenn?
Yes, I have a question for Dr. Dietz. If we defined altruism, as Webster's dictionary does, as unselfish concern for the welfare of others, first, do you believe that altruism really exists in humans, or that such actions can always be accounted for in terms of genetic selfishness? And if you do believe in altruism, how do you account for its having arisen by evolution through natural selection?
Dr. Dietz, if you will.
Well, I could answer that. It would take about 2 days. You're speaking of the idea of E.O. Wilson, of the selfish gene. And there's some merit to it, but this is sort of the edge of evolution science. Now the other creation, evolution is factual, based on evidence. Creation has not been revised, altered since the book of Genesis was written about 2,000 years ago. Creationists defend inflexible suppositions. Science is based on skepticism and irreverence for authority, tradition, and rejects all revolution of creation as uncertain.
Because we're nearly out of time, I want to ask you both to wrap things up, summarize with this thought in mind. Dr. Dietz, what would convince you that the rest of these folks over here on the other side of this issue are right? What would do it?
It would convince me if I saw an actual miracle. Now, people speak about miracles, but no, there's no proof, no scientific proof of any miracles ever happened. I believe it if a prayer is answered. I've never known of a prayer to be answered in my life or anyone else's life whose data I accept. The things are not double-blind. There are many anecdotal stories, but no reality. Now, the world is natural, based on natural laws, and it obeys natural laws.
And what would convince you, James White, that in fact the theory of evolution is exactly the fact that we should follow?
Well, if the theory of evolution were to explain humankind as we see it existing, the world as we see it existing, if it fit the facts as we know it, that would be a big point in its favor. But again, I point out that the evolutionist attempts to make this a battle between religion and science. It is not. I understand science. The facts of science are perfectly in line with what I am saying. It is a smokescreen to say that this is an anti-science thing. It is not. The facts of science are there. Natural selection takes place that is perfectly in harmony with the creationist viewpoint, and the people in our schools need to have the freedom to choose between those two perspectives.
Yesterday, there was a very small paragraph in USA Today, and some other newspapers picked it up across the country also. Let me read it to you, and then I'm going to introduce 4 guests who are joining us this morning. And no matter what your religious beliefs are, this should catch your ear. Even if you're an atheist or an agnostic or a deist or a pantheist or whatever you are, even if you don't know what you are, listen to this. 26 Bible scholars participating in the Jesus Seminar, an attempt to determine exactly what Jesus said, have announced that they, and I quote, strongly disagree that he expected to return to Earth and usher in a new age. Such beliefs should be ascribed to